You could question everything because there's so much more behind it. When you're talking about the direct energy weapons, you know, I'm thinking of Maui. Like, we still don't really know like what went on there.
Oh yeah, well, so in California where I am, I knew a friend of mine, a musical colleague, lost his house in one of the.
Oh wow!
Shoot, I can't remember which. There was a name for it. That it was about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
And man, when you look at it, it's like all the trees are there. They're all just fine around. So we saw that on 9/11, where all the paper they found one sink. They found one file cabinet in the whole thing. That doesn't make sense. On all the papers on the ground, and the cars are on fire, but all the paper and all the leaves are around it. So we're dealing with a different type of heat. Yeah. And so then you have the folks that are like, oh, it's thermite. So the guy, what's his name? Stephen Jones. Mm-hmm. He's a glowy. No pun intended, right? Because saying the glow, right? Yep. So he is the thermite guy. That's and also Richard Gage, I hate to say, he's also, in my opinion, is controlled opposition. Yep. He's the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. They're trying to distract from, we're dealing with a different
type of you believe that type of disinformation is part of a campaign to discredit anyone who's questioning it?
They're muddying the water, just like they're throwing out the fake AI of the Kamala stuff. Like they're doing real, but they're doing the fake stuff too. And then now in the future, everyone can say, oh, you're talking about the AI stuff. That's already been debunked. We're like, no, there was one true thing and sure, this was fake. So that's how they do it, right? They feed fake things, and we're gullible and we latch and we want those likes and everything. But you know, I still fall for it sometimes, but I've learned my lesson again and again, not to jump the gun on a lot of the stuff. Yeah. So with that thermite, that Stephen Jones guy, he's the guy that discredited Pons and Fleischman, who were the cold fusion dudes from like 1990. They came out and they were doing they were finding some real stuff. And this all goes back to the same type of alternative tech that T.T. Brown and Tesla, and they were all looking into. Yep. And these alternative forms of physics that they're secretly using, right? So they found that they were getting results with it, and it wasn't consistent, but they were trying to figure it out. And then who comes in? Stephen Jones, the same thermite guy who would come and mess up 9/11 10 years later. And he comes out and says, ooh, I did it too. Ooh, I did it too. But he didn't. He was lying. And it forced Pons and Fleischman to publish their results before that they were ready. And then they got discredited. And the whole thing was a hit job. And it came from Stephen Jones. They made a movie about it. You can watch it, an old movie called Heavy Watergate. I recommend it. Okay. And they trotted this dude out 10 years later to do the same thing to the 9/11 truth movement. So this whole thermite thing is a red herring to hide from the fact that we're dealing with a technology that day. And that should be very scary. But it's like, who used it on us, and who knew, and who was surprised? Like, certainly, you know, the hijackers or whatever, they didn't know. But did the Cheneys know? Like, Cheney isn't sitting there with this direct energy weapon technology hitting a button. I refuse to believe that, right?
I don't think it's that simple. I don't think you can boil evil down to something as simple as just a Cheney character, although I don't like Cheney. It's hard to boil it down to just like that guy. Like, I don't even know how much Bush knows.
The Mossad, right? Because people say, hey, there's the dancing Israelis. I'm like, yeah, okay, they knew. Were they, what level were they? Or did they know that there was a direct energy weapon that was going to pulverize, dustify those?
And we have articles recently of people from China saying they've got direct energy weapons up in the sky. And that could be disinformation as well, coming from them to scare everyone else. Who knows? But they are writing about it and they are talking about it publicly. This is something that's in the public conscious, and I believe it's probably get way more. It's like when people talk about the atom bomb, and we talk about nuclear warfare and how afraid everyone is about another bomb being dropped. I'm like, that's old school warfare. I mean, right now they can drop.
Some people even say that nukes are fake and gates.
Well, I could go down that route.
Is that whatever happened on 9/11 was real? So we can look at that. I mean, sure, maybe the planes weren't, but those towers used to be there, and then now they're not there anymore. And that had to have happened somehow. And there was no conventional mode of physics that caused them that much energy to fall and have a seismic reading of like 2 on the Richter scale. It's not possible. So it's not possible.
Let's zoom out and look at Earth, and an even bigger lie, because I believe there is a major lie happening with the way we even perceive Earth and our own existence.
Space. Elon Musk.
Space, all that stuff. Major problems with both those people. I mean, we can go back to NASA and talk about paperclip and all that stuff, but Earth and we were talking about earlier when it comes to, like, how do you connect Sirius to Crater Earth? Let's bring that thread into the next.
Sure.
How do you do that? Like, what is up with Sirius and Crater Earth?
So,
and what is Crater Earth?
Since you mentioned paperclip and the Nazis,
oh yeah, perfect.
There's one funny story that I learned. I was reading, and some of Joseph Farrell's work, who does great work, great books, that they were experimenting. So there's the hollow Earth theory, which we're all very familiar with. Some of us are, at least. They were experimenting with that. They were actually on the inside of the hollow Earth, or in a concave thing. So they were actually doing radar stuff with their subs and stuff under the assumption that they were in a concave situation. Right. It didn't work, but sometimes it did, but sometimes it did. So clearly there's something else going on, but it goes to show that there was an awareness of this. So look, I have been in the crazy of the conspiracies for a long time. Like, I was, looking into the DMT stuff, and I was exploring astrally other concepts of things for when I was younger. I have a kid now. I don't do that stuff anymore. But so I avoided trying to take the whole flat Earth thing. I mean, I appreciate it, and like, just like anything else, it's all, there's compromise and like any other thing. But I always didn't really want to go. I like to apply myself in areas where I feel like there needs to be more, like Thomas Townsend Brown. Like, the fact that you didn't know who that is, that's important to me, because I'm like, I'm glad I mentioned it, because not enough people are talking about this. But you got everyone talking about the flat Earth stuff, and I like it. I appreciate it. I want that conversation to have, and I get that it can be used to discredit, and a lot of people, it's a turnoff for a lot of people. So I tend to have avoided that for a long time. So. But I was looking into the space being fake and all that stuff for a long time. But it really wasn't until COVID where, look, I made vaccines my main thing, right? So through all the research, all the years, Alex Jones and all that stuff, and I ended up, and I had a kid, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to really look into the vaccine thing. And I found out about smallpox and polio, and how we were lied to about basically all of these things, Spanish flu, all this stuff. So I realized that the vaccine thing and the pandemic thing, that was going to be the next main thing. So COVID happened, and I was like, guys, this is it. This is the thing. And I felt like I didn't do more. So I was depressed and traumatized by COVID, not in the way that other people were, but in the way that I felt like I should have done more to warn people. Not like one voice would have mattered, but I felt like I don't know. I just felt a lot of guilt.
You're watching the world shut down and go crazy, and you're like, no.
I wanted, my family members were freaking out, and I was just trying to like say, it's okay, guys, but they wouldn't listen, and of course not. And it was sad. I couldn't, I was very isolated, but it's all right. I had my kid, and we were just chilling, but whatever. So I was in a pretty dark space, and I wrote a song called Pandemic Dance. I kind of given up. My YouTube channel had been suppressed for many years, so I kind of gave up on that. My local gigs were drying up. I don't have to give you my sob story, but I was in a place where I'm like, hey, you know what? I need to just do something different. And so I remember I was just on YouTube or something, and I saw a recommendation, and it just said a phrase, Crater Earth. And it was one of those things where, like, I'd never seen that before, but I'm a word guy. Like I said, I love words. I've memorized the Scrabble dictionary for words under 9 letters. So I'm like, I look at patterns, and I'm like seeing things. I love, what was it in Donnie Darko? They say the most beautiful phrase is cellar door, right? That's a great, cellar door is a great phrase. Well, I know a good phrase when I see it, or a good word. Words are spelling, right? The language is made by Shakespeare, was really just a bunch of occultists that made English, and we are using spells as we speak. And that's why music is so powerful. It's like music is spells, but doubly so, right? It's the music and the words combined, and it's meme magic, right? That's why it's such a threat. And I want a monopoly on musicians, right? So with words, they give out a certain energy. So I saw Crater Earth, and I'm like, I immediately fell in love with whatever energy that was. I didn't know what it meant. And I'm like, I gotta find out more. So it's mostly this guy on who was on YouTube. His name's Wim. God Give Lamstay was his channel. He got banned from YouTube, which makes sense. But I realized that I had actually been exposed to this and been thinking about this for a while, namely the work of Charles Fort. Are you aware of the Fortean phenomenon?
Yeah, he was like an early observer of the strange.
He was like the schizo poster of the early 20th century.
Yeah.
He's our people, man. He was so sardonic, very good wit. It's a little dry, his reading. For those who don't know, Charles Fort, and that he had a whole society that came out, he was very popular back in the day. He would go around picking little articles in scientific journals, newspapers from around the world. He traveled, right? Going to tiny little towns in Spain or wherever and find just random stuff. So he coined the term ball lightning. He found out a lot of these phenomena. He was talking about alien abductions before. So he just was finding all this stuff. And he started out as a skeptic, but by the end, if you really read his work, you realize that he's like, there is something else happening here. And so one of the big things that he talks about are falling from the sky. So phenomena of fish falling, frogs falling, pollen,
still happens.
And stuff that's in such massive quantities. Species are not known from the region. And basically he determined that he called it as the Super Sargasso Sea, that there is a sea that is not necessarily the firmament above us, but it is outside, and that things are brought in through weather phenomena from other places. And that always I was like, oh, that's cool, right? And then he took us further, where he said that he was skeptical, like he didn't believe in all this, but he was very careful with his words, and that he acknowledged that to get to the planets in our solar system, we might be able to walk there. And I thought, oh, okay. And meanwhile, and there's a book written in the 1920s that was published again in the 1940s, which I actually found an original version of. It's called Worlds Beyond the Poles. And he cites Byrd, Admiral Byrd as well. And it's some random dude, I think Italian guy who wrote it. And he had a vision, it's like, it's tough when it comes to that sort of thing. You're like, oh, psychics or whatnot. But he had a vision of how this would work, and then he studied it for 20 years and talked to physicists and stuff, and determined that the stars are a reflection of the bigger Earth, and that we are basically on a vast. And this is why it's like, the flat are we round? Are we flat? I don't think I know. We could be on a giant round object. We could be on a giant flat object. We could be on a giant infinite plane. Right. They all sort of fit with what this theory is. And that the moon itself is actually, if you think about it, there's different layers of the projection, right? So you have the zoomed way in the back out, and that's the moon, and that's our bigger plane. And then you have the more zoomed in perspective behind it as the stars, essentially. Right. And the stars are our bigger world again, right? So I know this sounds a little bit convoluted and like, what the hell are you talking about? But it is very elegant. And I'm like one of those people where I'm like, oh, I want to find the pieces all have to connect. The moment I started exploring this idea, the pieces just started filling in. And like, I didn't immediately, I'm not saying I'm espousing this as my true belief system, right? I'm a skeptic when it comes to everything, but this idea that there are lands beyond the wall in Antarctica makes so much sense when you start to talk about World War II and the Nazis going to Antarctica and all this, the treaties are there. And then this Admiral Byrd, and he had gone, and then what was called Operation High Jump, which was 2 years or 3 years after World War II, where we sent a bunch of subs and military people, and people died, and they don't even want to say how they died. And we fought something down there. Suspicious. And Byrd comes back from that and says, the next war is going to be fought between ships that are going to be able to fly from pole to pole in minutes. He said that to some Argentinian newspaper and then never talked about it again. And then he went on the news or some program and was like, yeah, there is a whole land bigger than America, or as big as North America, beyond Antarctica.
And that's on video. That part is on video.
Yes, he said that on video. That's right. And so there's a lot of, was he a Freemason? Was he just making this up? Well, no, I think this was also during the time when there was a anti-gravity section of Boeing. Like, they were open about what they were working on. Everything went black around the 50s, and then they shot Kennedy. I mean, the 60s, of course, the rest is history, right? So to go back to this crater Earth idea, this guy who has a YouTube channel really sort of started looking into this, and the idea would be that the moon is not real, or at least it's not physical. It is a reflection of the world that's around us, the lands around us, and there's different perspectives of like where the continents are and all that stuff. But the idea that we landed on the moon actually isn't a lie, in that we just landed outside the ice wall, if that makes sense. So that's the moon. It's just the areas that are outside. You
have to recontextualize. You have to recontextualize your idea of geography and what we think of as space, because you're saying the theory is if you go beyond whatever bird is talking about, that wall or that land that's out there, it could go on. It's a great expanse, possibly infinite, where you can walk.
Big sea out there, and there's different craters. There are different biosystems. I would say Atlantis, the original Atlantis, would be out there, and this guy, God Geflamste, I'll call him Wim because that's his name. He thinks that Atlantis is actually Saturn. So what we see as Saturn in the sky is a nearby crater to us. It's one of the planets are the ones that are really close by, right? So here's the kicker, right? And this is when it all starts to click. If the stars are a reflection of all the different biosystems, ecosystems that are around us on this infinite plane, we're up there. We're one of them. Wouldn't we be the brightest one? Right? So we're close. We're looking straight up at us. The ones that are really distant and those are far away from us. The planets are the ones that are really close to us, and they're on a different zoom point essentially. But the star that would represent us would be the brightest star in the sky. And the brightest star in the sky is Sirius. So we are Sirius. So this whole idea of Sirius is this place that we're trying to reach. No, this is a secret that is at the highest levels. I believe this. I think this is probably true. Is that secret of Sirius is that it's actually us. And this awakening and reaching Sirius that the Freemasons try to do is leaving. That's why they have the stairway to Sirius. It's the bigger Earth. And I will recommend everyone, if you haven't seen it, even if you have seen it, go watch the Truman Show tonight. Oh, dude,
I just wrote about it a week or two ago. Because I wrote about it because the image of Biden walking up the plane after coming back from supposed COVID, it looked, if you look at it, it looks exactly like the end of Truman walking up the steps with the fake sky.
That is a Freemasonic thing. I do an analysis in this in one of my videos where even like they put the pillars and it's a light that falls. So this actually isn't a spoiler because it happens in the very beginning. But this satellite falls in between these two pillars, and Truman walks in between and picks up the satellite, and it says the word Sirius on it. Okay, so this is. They put this stuff in movies like as it's funny. In your face as possible. You need to watch and the whole idea of Truman leaving his town and going to Fiji and all these metaphors that are in is actually the bigger Earth. It's this metaphor than him and finding the wall. And people are like, oh, flat Earth, that sure, fine. It's a bigger Earth metaphor, and we are Sirius metaphor. So to go back to the Dogon tribe, and this is an idea that occurred to me that I never seen anyone else say this. So this researcher went to Africa, and what I said earlier was they pointed and said, hey, look we're from Sirius. In that context, this is actually a species that is coming and saying, look this is us. This is where you are right now on the star map. Are you trying to see what I'm saying here?
Oh yeah.
Like this was them saying, hey, check it out. We're here. That. Maybe they were pointing to the other stars in the series as like they're a neighbor. So this gets back to aliens and why I always had a hard time with aliens and why so many these religions and the Mormons and the Scientologies and hey, L. Ron Hubbard connected with Jack Parsons and Crowley and all these things are, and we talk, even the Bible, fallen angels, right? But what were the stories? They mated with humans, the human women,
the Nephilim. And
like, okay, so you're saying a species like developed on another, like in a completely different carbon ratio? Like, no. What makes more sense to my brain is that we are part of the same ecosystem, larger one, and that a neighbor is still part of our Earth, but the bigger Earth, and we were invaded. We were invaded at a very early age. We were doing probably fine in the Garden of Eden, and we were invaded by a neighboring species from a neighboring planet, which is basically just beyond the ice wall. There's a whole bunch of different cultures and civilizations out there, and they have been they took their building ideas, they took whatever from their civilization and they did it here. Maybe they were leaving, maybe theirs got flooded, maybe something happened to theirs, or maybe they were just colonizing. And I think that one of the ways that they do this and they control us is with a parasite. And this connects with the parasite pill theory, in that I think that a lot of people are controlled, and a lot of people will point to toxoplasmosis gondii or whatever the cat litter one, right? I think that's one of many, but I think that there is a type of parasite that is taken over like a lot of the elites, and it's a whole other can of worms. See what I did there? And I think that it may be not native to us, to our biome. And I think that this parasitic infection is something that we have been dealing with and is alien, and it connects with Stranger Things.
Is that why they didn't want us taking ivermectin?
So yes, and fenbendazole, or I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go say that one, but
those dewormers one, right? So and that's why they freaked out about ivermectin. Okay, so this worm thing, parasite thing, I think is connected to Crater Earth theory, or this, people will call it Greater Earth. I like Crater Earth because it sounds cool. I think that there's it's basically an alien invasion that happened before that we can remember, and this innate feeling that we have of this uncanny valley where we can recognize that something isn't quite human about this. Like, this is something that goes back. It's ancient generations, like to the very beginning, because we were exposed to something that wasn't quite human.